So with the new season of Demon Slayer just around the corner, now is the perfect time to go over everything that happened in the anime thus far. And man oh man is there a lot to cover. With the release of the insanely successful follow-up canonical movie Demon Slayer Mugen Train and the official announcement of Season 2, it's only right to begin where everything started, Demon Slayer Season 1. So with that, the purpose of this series is to quite literally go over everything that happened in Season 1 of Demon Slayer, so when Season 2 comes out, you're back up to speed. Now, since Season 1 of Demon Slayer is 26 episodes long, this video will be cut into two parts. Part 1 covering episodes 1 through 13, and Part 2 covering episodes 14 through 26. And don't worry, there will also be a revisiting Demon Slayer Mugen Train arc after we cover Season 1 and those 7 episodes have been released. But enough talk about the plans for revisiting Demon Slayer. We are wasting time. Let's jump right into episode 1. We get a quick look at our main character named Tanjiro Kamado carrying his wounded and unconscious sister named Nezuko. While he's trying to process everything that happened, he vows to save Nezuko's life no matter what. I actually like little opening teasers like this. I think establishing your main character's motive early is a good thing. 1, because it helps pacing, and 2, it helps the audience come to terms with what's at stake for Tanjiro, or to better put it, what drives him as our protagonist. But now back to the show. We drop in on Tanjiro getting ready to head off to a nearby town to sell charcoal to its inhabitants. But before he can leave, his mother Kie stops him so she can wipe the soot off his face. She also warns him that it's dangerous to travel with all the snowfall and that he doesn't have to go if he doesn't want to. However, Tanjiro insists and says that he wants to make sure that she and his siblings can all eat as much as they want on New Year's. Before he can head off, we meet 2 more of his younger siblings, Shigeru and Hanako. They ask if he's going into town and Hanako actually says that she wants to go with him. However, Kie says that they both can't because they can't walk fast like Tanjiro. And also, Tanjiro agrees with his mother and says that they can't go. However, to make them feel better, Tanjiro says that he'll bring back something for Shigeru, and also promises Hanako that he'll read to her when he gets back. Before Tanjiro leaves, he asks his other younger brother Takeo to chop as much wood as he can while he's away. He's not happy that he has to do it alone, but he agrees anyway. Overall, it's a cute scene and we see how much his family both respects Tanjiro and also wants to spend time with him. So as Tanjiro is finally leaving, we run into his final 2 siblings that we haven't seen yet, Nezuko and Rokta. If you haven't noticed, Tanjiro has a big ass family. We have Kie, Tanjiro, Nezuko, Takeo, Hanako, Shigeru, and Rokta. But back to the show, Nezuko says that she was putting Rokta down for a nap so he would make a scene while Tanjiro made his way to the nearby village. Once finally arriving, almost immediately we see how much he's respected and how many people actually rely on him there. We also see that he has a heightened sense of smell when a man runs to him and asks for him to smell a plate to prove he's innocent and didn't break it. Turns out it was actually a cat that did. Once Tanjiro tells the woman, she ends up believing him, no questions asked. After he sells off the charcoal, he stopped by a man named Sabito and told to wait until the following morning to make his way back home, since it's nighttime and that's when demons lurk around. Tanjiro heeds his warning and decides to stay with him for the night. After he's done eating, he asks Sabito if demons would ever try to come into people's homes, where he ends up confirming that they would. Tanjiro then eternally promises that he will bring his siblings next time to keep Sabito company, since he has no family left alive. After that, he goes to sleep. The following day on Tanjiro's way home, he picks up a strong smell of blood. In a panic, he rushes back home, and that's when we see it. 2 of Tanjiro's siblings, those 2 siblings being Nezuko and Rokta. He then looks inside of his home and sees that everyone else is dead. Now racing against time, Tanjiro carries Nezuko, the only one who is still breathing, to the nearest doctor. However, before he can reach the nearest town, Nezuko begins to wake up. With her son jerking around, it causes Tanjiro to lose his balance and he falls off a steep ledge. The snow softens his fall and he sees Nezuko standing. Worried about her condition, he tells her not to stand. And the moment he actually goes to check on her, she begins to attack him and he realizes that she's now a demon. His mind begins to race at the thought of his sister having to suffer and he begins to cry, and so does she. Realizing that some of her humanity is still intact, Tanjiro snaps out of it, and at the same time, a demon slayer named Tomoyoka attacks. He's able to dodge and shield Nezuko just in time, but Tomoyoka is fast enough to retrieve her. Tanjiro then begins to beg and ask that he doesn't hurt Nezuko. Once Tanjiro begins groveling again, Tomoyoka grows increasingly angry with him.
惨めったらしくうずくまるのはやめろ。そんなことが通用するなら、お前の家族は殺されていない。なぜさっきお前は妹に覆いかぶさった。あんなことで守ったつもりか。なぜ斧を振らなかった。なぜ俺に背中を見せた。そのしくじりで妹を取られている。
Tomoyoka proceeds to test Tanjiro's resolve by stabbing Nezuko in her arm, and Tanjiro begins his attack.
感情に任せた単純な攻撃。愚か。斧はどこだ。
This is where Tomioka realizes that Tanjiro wasn't attacking to beat him, but instead attacking him to allow an opening for his sister so she can get away. If he did end up taking down Tomioka with that attack, then that would have just been a plus. Nezuko then breaks free from his grasp and runs over to Tanjiro. At first, Tomioka thinks that it's to attack him, but instead it's to protect him. She then goes on the offensive and puts her life on the line for him, and this is all the proof that he needs to allow Nezuko and Tanjiro to find the cure that they're looking for.
置き去りにしてごめんね、炭治郎。禰豆子、頼むわね。
Once Tanjiro wakes up, he sees Nezuko still unconscious beside him, except now with a bamboo muzzle. Tomioka then directs them to see a man named Sakonji Urokodaki, who lives at the bottom of Mount Sagiri.
富岡義勇に言われてきたと言え。今は日が差していないから大丈夫なようだが、妹を太陽のもとに連れ出すなよ。
And with that, Tanjiro buries his family and takes Nezuko with them on the start of a very long journey. Jumping straight into episode 2, Tanjiro crosses a man farming and asks if he can purchase his broken basket, some straw, and some bamboo. The man actually insists that he takes it for free since it had holes in it, but Tanjiro, being Tanjiro, insists on paying. Afterwards, he then makes his way back to where he left Nezuko and repairs the basket. His plan is to put Nezuko inside of it during the day and carry her since she can't come in contact with the sun. However, he runs into an issue. The basket appears to be too small for her. Tanjiro then recalls when Nezuko doubled in size when she was trying to attack him. He then theorizes that if she's able to double in size, then she might be able to also shrink. And as we come to find out, she actually can. On Tanjiro's way to Mount Sagiri, he comes across the smell of blood again and a demon eating the remains of 2 men he killed. Face to face with the smell of blood, Nezuko feels the true urge of being hungry for human flesh while Tanjiro is attacked. Upon hearing his distress, she quickly snaps out of it and comes to his aid. She quite literally clicks his head clean off, leaving nothing but the demon's body. However, this actually doesn't kill him. The headless body then attacks Nezuko once realizing that she's a genuine threat, while the demon's head grows arms and attacks Tanjiro. And in a hurry to help Nezuko, Tanjiro headbutts the demon, and with his hair tangled around his axe, he throws it at a tree, leaving the demon stuck. He makes it to Nezuko and tackles the headless body over a cliff along with himself. Nezuko catches Tanjiro before he's able to plummet, however the demon falls head first, neck first, onto the ground below. This causes the demon to be knocked unconscious due to his body dying. Tanjiro, now panicking at the idea of ending the demon's life, is stopped by a masked man who says he can't finish it off with an ordinary knife.
刺してもダメなら頭を潰すしか。
The masked man is able to sense Tanjiro's lack of hostility and says to himself that he won't make it living this kind of life. And taking too long, the demon finally wakes up and begins flailing his arms at Tanjiro. However, it's now sunrise, meaning that it's too late for him. We then witness what happens to demons when coming in direct contact with sunlight, and understandably so, this causes Tanjiro to worry about Nezuko. But no need to worry because she's found shelter back inside in her basket. As for the masked man, he's buried the victims who died and then finally introduces himself as Sakonji Urokodaki, the person that Giyu had told Tanjiro to meet.
Tanjiro, 妹が人を食った時お前はどうする?
Urokodaki tells Tanjiro that his problem is that he's too slow with making decisions. He also says that it's because his resolve is too weak, and that the answer to his question should have been that he would kill his sister and slit his own stomach and die if she ever devoured a human. He then instructs Tanjiro to come back with him to the mountain where he lives at to see if he'd be fit to join the Demon Slayer Corps. This is where his true test begins. Finally making it there, Urokodaki leads him up to Mount Sagiri, while Nezuko stays inside and rests. Tanjiro's test is to make it down the mountain back to Urokodaki's place by himself before daybreak. However, it's not that easy. Not only is breathing more difficult, but also... As you can see, this will be easier said than done. Thanks to Tanjiro's senses, however, he is able to sniff out some of the traps since they are set by human hands, but that doesn't mean he can dodge them all. And cutting back to Urokodaki, we see that he is actually taking care of Nezuko until Tanjiro's return, who actually ends up making it back to him in time. And with this being the case, Urokodaki accepts Tanjiro as his student. Kicking off episode 3, we see Nezuko still asleep while Tanjiro and Urokodaki continue training. Urokodaki ends up telling Tanjiro about the final exam and how it will determine if he can be part of the Demon Slayer Corps. But until then, all of his training will take place on Mount Sagiri. And also, despite the many weeks that have passed since arriving, Nezuko has yet to wake up. During that time though, Tanjiro has learned a lot. He's already had good senses, but putting them to use alongside his reflex and awareness training, swordsmanship training, and his newly learned breathing training, everything is shaping out pretty well. It might sound trivial, but breathing is a key component to making a successful demon slayer. This specific technique enhances the person's natural healing abilities and, as Urokodaki puts it, stabilizes and energizes the spirit. But of course it's easier said than done, and it takes Tanjiro quite a while to learn how to breathe effectively. And on the topic of Tanjiro's breathing style, it's based on water. So as such, Urokodaki instructs Tanjiro to, quote-unquote, become one with the water. At this point in Tanjiro's training, it's been 6 months since Nezuko was last awake. After being examined by a doctor, it's confirmed that there's nothing particularly wrong with her. And though hearing the news does bother Tanjiro, he proceeds with his training. I'll try to keep my opinions short during this video since its main purpose is to give a full recap of the season thus far, but I do want to say I like how they're handling his training. Fast forwarding through what would be dedicated to a full arc in Shonen without making this 6-month time skip seem out of place is a bold move. In terms of showing and not telling, it does a surprisingly good job making sure they stay on pace and at least give us key details before moving on to another phase of his training. It feels like they're using their granted 26 episodes wisely and understand what all they want to cover to keep their audience's attention and also informed. But anyway, Urokodaki tells Tanjiro after his final day of training that he no longer has anything to teach him and that the rest is up to him. He then leads him to a massive boulder and tells him that if he can slice it, he will allow him to enter the final selection. Of course, upon attempting to cut it in half, Tanjiro fails, which initiates yet another training montage, but this time Urokodaki is not there to teach him. 6 months later, and Tanjiro still hasn't made any progress with the boulder. Frustrated, he begins to train harder, except this time he has an audience. The first person we meet is Sabito. He spars with Tanjiro, and as you can probably guess, Tanjiro is completely outclassed. When Sabito tells Tanjiro to come at him, Tanjiro is reluctant since he has a real sword and Sabito doesn't. During their fight, Sabito discloses that he was able to slice the boulder, and that he was a student of Urokodaki. After urging Tanjiro to remember the lessons that he's been taught during the 1.5 years worth of training, and also after defeating Tanjiro, he calls upon another bystander named Makomo to take over. With Tanjiro being knocked out, she patiently waits for him to wake up. Once he does, she introduces herself and begins training him and correcting his unnecessary movements and bad habits. Though their training appears to be going well, Tanjiro couldn't help but be curious about where Makomo came from. He even asks her, but she never answers him. However, she does say this. She does also tell Tanjiro that she and Sabito aren't siblings, but they were both raised by Urokodaki after becoming orphans. She also says that there were others she took care of as well. She doesn't go into specifics, but she does say how they're all watching them. I think it's pretty clear what happened to them at this point, but to keep the video linear, we'll wait for the big reveal instead of jumping ahead of ourselves. But back to what Makomo is saying. With the only way to achieve this kind of feat being through training, Tanjiro pushes himself even harder and continues sparring with Sabito, with the hope of finally beating him. They then temporarily part ways until Tanjiro is ready to face him again. It isn't until 6 months later that Tanjiro challenges him, and this time instead of a wooden sword, Sabito has a real one. However, even so, this is the day Tanjiro wins. It's there revealed that Tanjiro had actually cut the boulder in half and both Sabito and Makomo were gone. This suggests that Sabito and Makomo were spirits the whole time. This was a very nicely executed training montage. Honestly, I'm surprised they were able to cover 2 years' time within a 20-minute episode. It didn't feel like I missed out on anything crucial due to pacing or anything. Honestly, it felt natural. Also, for those who are trying to keep track of how long Nezuko has been asleep for, it's been approximately 2 years. Jesus. But finally succeeding in slicing the boulder, we move on to episode 4. Urokodaki admits that he had no intention of letting Tanjiro proceed with the final selection, because he didn't think it would be possible for him to slice the boulder. As for his reason, he says he didn't want to see any more children die because of the final selection. Even so, he commends Tanjiro and is shown being proud of all that he has accomplished. And with that, Urokodaki gives Tanjiro a proper send-off by giving him a lot to eat before he leaves the following day. At this point, it's clear that Urokodaki cares deeply for Tanjiro and wants nothing but the best for him and Nezuko. Though his training was harsh, he notes that everything that Tanjiro's experienced until now will pale in comparison to the life he's pursuing. But as the night continues, long-haired Tanjiro is no more. He finally decides to cut his hair in preparation for the final selection. And while he's doing that, Urokodaki tells him to make sure that he's eating properly and getting bigger and stronger, because the demons he'll be facing will be doing the same.
基本的に鬼の強さは人を食った数だ。たくさん食べたら強くなるんですか？そうだ。
He goes on by saying that some demons have otherworldly powers and can use strange spells. This of course means that not all strictly have just brute strength. Urokodaki proceeds to tell Tanjiro that once he's honed his sense of smell, he'll be able to tell how many humans a demon has eaten. He then gives Tanjiro a warding mask that's charged with a spell to protect him from harm. The day of the final selection is here and Tanjiro checks on Nezuko one last time before he leaves. Though she's still asleep, he tells her that he'll make sure to come back no matter what and then takes his leave. Urokodaki assures Tanjiro that while he's away, he'll take care of Nezuko in his absence. Not worried, Tanjiro quickly thanks him and begins heading towards the final selection, but not before he tells Urokodaki one final thing.
Sabito to Makomo ni yoroshiku! Tanjiro, なぜお前が死んだあの子たちの名を知っている?
And with that, we get confirmation of what we witnessed last episode. Sabito and Makomo are indeed already dead. But moving on to the next scene, Tanjiro walks through a long trail of wisteria flowers until he's finally made it to the final selection. There, two girls explain the objective of the final selection and the strategic placement of the wisteria flowers around the area.
この藤重山には外に出ることはできません。山のふもとから中腹にかけて鬼どもの嫌う藤の花が一年中狂い咲いているからでございます。しかしここから先には藤の花は咲いておりませんから鬼どもがおります。
They then go on to say that the candidates will need to survive 7 days to pass the final selection. And with that, everyone is on their way. Almost immediately, Tanjiro senses and is confronted by two demons who are fighting over who gets to eat him. However, Tanjiro has no plans on going down that easily. He has successfully killed his first demon, 2 at that, and all thanks to his training in the use of Urokodaki's sword. But it's not over just yet. Tanjiro then senses an even bigger demon nearby and sees a fellow candidate running away from it. Makomo asks Sabito if he thinks Tanjiro will be able to defeat quote-unquote that one, referring to the demon that Tanjiro is witnessing as we speak. Sabito admits that he doesn't know and that no matter how hard a person tries, it never appears to be enough. He then ends off by saying,
知ってるだろう。それはお前も。
This hinting that both of them fell victim to the same demon. And speaking of the demon, he's just eaten another candidate and is on the path of eating one more until Tanjiro saves him. After asking Tanjiro what year it is, the demon reveals that he's been stuck on Mount Fujikasune for 47 years after Urokodaki captured him and brought him there. After that, the candidate that Tanjiro saves says that it should be impossible for a demon to last that long, and the average demon dies out well before then. The demon reveals that he's eaten at least 50 candidates since his arrival.
50人。11、12、13。で、お前で14だ。
This time, the demon is counting how many he's killed with a mask like Tanjiro's, meaning that's how many children that Urokodaki has lost thanks to the final selection, and this demon in particular. He then goes on to say that the two that stood out the most to him were Sabito and Makomo. Sabito because he was the most powerful and Makomo because she was the most agile. And this is where Tanjiro learns the fate of the two who taught him. Losing his composure, Tanjiro runs straight in without a plan and gets hit into a tree, breaking his warding mask. Sabito's spirit tells Tanjiro to calm his breathing and not to worry about him and Makomo. And while Tanjiro is the demon's main target, the candidate who Tanjiro saved earlier runs away. And just before the demon can finish Tanjiro off, Shigeru, one of Tanjiro's younger siblings, wakes him up before he gets killed. Thanks to his senses, he can tell the directions of the demon's attacks, even if they come from underground. And thanks to his reflexes and training, he's able to successfully slice off the demon's head. Before we move on, I really do like their use of the dead as a way to help Tanjiro out of life-threatening situations. It's a nice way to show all the people he keeps with him and all those who are looking after him during his journey. But moving forward with episode 5, we get a flashback to 47 years ago when Urokodaki first defeats the demon. Cutting back to the present day, we see that it was actually him seeing the same determination that Urokodaki had way back then in Tanjiro today. Visibly shocked and frustrated that he's dying, we get another scene of what appears to be the demon while he was still human, crying for his brother. Whether it be remorse or fear that the demon is feeling, it's clear that Tanjiro has no interest in letting the demon suffer alone, even after all the people, children, that he's killed to stay alive all these years. Tanjiro senses the demon's sadness and holds his hand during his final moments.
神様、この人が今度生まれてくる時は鬼になんてなりませんように。
兄ちゃん、兄ちゃん、手握ってくれよ。
Yeah, I'd be lying if I said this scene didn't pull on my heartstrings. Demon Slayer also does a good job at showing the type of person Tanjiro is, despite having to kill his enemy. Tanjiro has empathy, even for demons. However, this doesn't stop him from doing what he needs to do. But back to the scene, we see Sabito, Makomo, and the other 11 students of Urokodaki finally getting the closure they need to pass on. But proceeding with the final selection, Tanjiro tries to speak with some of the demons, but none of them are cooperative and only try to eat him, so he ends up having to kill them. As for why he's trying to talk to him, he's looking for information. Exhausted and not any closer to finding a way to make Nezuko human again, Tanjiro realizes that he's made it through the demon-ridden area into the Wisterias. In other words, he has passed the final selection. But the number of candidates have gone down quite a bit. Only 3 others made it along with Tanjiro. To keep this video linear, I won't introduce them yet. Just remember their faces. We'll meet them again soon enough. Tanjiro does notice that the person he had saved from the big demon who ended up running away didn't make it either. Though you'd expect this to be a happy moment, none of them seem too excited to have survived it. Especially Yellowhair. Though I am sure that most of us know his name by now, let's pretend that we don't. Once we've properly met everyone, Yellowhair and the rest will have their names. The 2 girls from the last episode congratulate all 4 candidates on surviving the final selection. Now the only thing left for them all to do is to get the measurements for their uniforms and choose the ore that they want their swords to be made out of. Oh, and they're also assigned Kasugai crows. They will be used for communication. Everyone appears to have gotten a crow except Yellowhair, who ends up getting a little sparrow. Though the majority is fine with it and understands the process, there is one person who grows more and more agitated and impatient because he hasn't gotten his sword yet. We'll call him Scar for the time being. So Scar decides to get violent with one of the girls.
Katana da yo, katana. Ima sugu katana yokose. Kisatsutai no katana.
Not okay with how Scar is treating the girl, though she appears to be unbothered by what's going on, Tanjiro intervenes.
Yatte miro yo.
Once the situation is de-escalated, the candidates step up and prepare to choose the ore for their swords. And since they all look the same, Tanjiro decides to not rely on his vision to tell him which one he wants, but instead to rely on his sense of smell. We then transition to a man speaking with this crow.
5人も生き残ったのかい。また私の子供たちが増えた。どんな剣士になるのかな。
If you notice, the man says that 5 of them survived and passed the selection. However, we only saw 4. This means there's one unaccounted for, and can only mean there's still one more new demon slayer that we still have to meet. The question now is, when will that be? Pretty beat up, Tanjiro finally makes his way back to Urokodaki and Nezuko, and upon making it to his home, we get a little surprise. Nezuko is finally awake. She runs to Tanjiro, who collapses while trying to make his way to her and hugs him. And Urokodaki makes it back with firewood in time to see Tanjiro has returned and rushes over to hug him as well. We can also see him crying underneath his mask. Once finally refreshed, Tanjiro tells Urokodaki that he killed the demon who killed so many of his students. And though he is relieved to hear that, he warns Tanjiro that the road he's heading down will only introduce stronger demons, and that some will even possess a special spell called a blood demon art. Tanjiro makes an observation about Nezuko and says that she's different from all the other demons that he's had to face. This is mostly in reference to her excessive sleeping.
あれは血気術の類ではないだろう。これは憶測だが、禰豆子は人の血肉を食らう代わりに眠ることで体力を回復しているのかもしれない。
We then jump to 15 days later where Tanjiro's sword finally arrives. Surprisingly enough, the person delivering it is also the person who made it. This masked man's name is Haganezuka. Upon seeing Tanjiro's appearance, he calls him a child of brightness, referring to the color of his hair and eyes. He says this happens when a person is born into a family that works with fire. Apparently, a child of brightness is considered very lucky. As for his sword, Haganezuka says that there's a good chance that his sword will turn red like his eyes and hair. He knows that the swords demon slayers use change color depending on the person wielding it. However, when Tanjiro unsheathes his sword, it turns black. He then asks if black means that he's unlucky, where Urokodaki states that it doesn't necessarily mean that. He does note, however, that it's not often that he sees one that color. And just in time, with Tanjiro receiving his sword, he's given his first mission from his crow, which he discovers can speak. Apparently, night after night, girls have been vanishing, so Tanjiro's mission is to find the demon responsible and kill it. Jumping into episode 6, Tanjiro and Urokodaki have a final meeting where he tells him a couple more things before his first mission. The first being that his uniform is made of special fabric strong enough to keep low-level demons from tearing it easily. And as for the Nichiren swords that demon slayers use,
持ち主によって色が変わり、それぞれの色ごとに特性がある。
However, since Tanjiro's sword came out black and so little is known about them, it's rumored that those who have black swords never go far. This doesn't worry Tanjiro though, since his goal isn't to make a name for himself. His goal is simply to learn how to change his sister back to human. Urokodaki then gives Tanjiro a present that ends up being a box that he can put Nezuko in during the day. He put the light so it wouldn't be too heavy and also coated it to reinforce the exterior. And with that, the two say their goodbyes and Tanjiro is on his way. Taking a look at the town where all the girls have gone missing, we see a boy named Kazumi who's pretty out of it. If you remember, he was the boy who was with Satoko, the girl who ended up vanishing at the end of last episode. Girls going missing there has been such a regular occurrence that people are actually talking about it in broad daylight, wondering who will be next. Tanjiro stops Kazumi and asks if he can tell him more about the night of Satoko's disappearance. Kazumi accepts and takes Tanjiro to the place where she went missing.
かすかに鬼の匂いが残ってるけど、まだらというか。
While patrolling the area and confirming there is demon activity, it quickly becomes nighttime, meaning the demon, if he really is going to show again tonight, will be making his move soon. Cutting to a girl getting ready for bed, she expresses her worries about the girls being abducted in the middle of the night. As she finally falls asleep, we see exactly how they disappear. This is also our first showcase of a blood demon art. Tanjiro senses the demon nearby and rushes to where he feels the most of his presence.
匂いが一番濃い場所。ここだ。
The girl is first to rush to the surface and Tanjiro is able to retrieve her. He then asks the demon where all the other girls that were kidnapped are. But instead of receiving a comprehensive response, we get one of the most grating noises ever. Yeah, that noise triggered the fuck out of me. Not interested in answering his questions, the demon goes back underground. Tanjiro hands the girl over to Kazumi so he can fight, and then it's revealed that there are 3 identical demons and not just one. Or to better put it, one demon split into 3. In a quick flashback, Urokodaki tells Tanjiro that the first person turned to a demon over 1,000 years ago. He also says that single demon will be the one who knows how to turn Nezuko back. As for that demon's name, it's Muzan Kibutsuji. Growing more and more aggravated with Tanjiro's interference, the demon speaks and tells him to back off or that girl will go stale on him. A second clone then appears and calms down his other self. Nope, shut the fuck up. The one with the chittering voice then appears and makes the obnoxious ass sound again, while the other speaks and tries to see if he's collected her hairpin. He says that if her hairpin is among one of the ones he's collected over time, that means he's already eaten her, and quite clearly we see her bow is a part of that collection. This angers Tanjiro, and while his attention is on one of the other clones, the demon tries to attack in his blind spot. However, Tanjiro is quick enough to evade the demon's attack and also a counterattack, slicing off an arm. Now getting ganged up on, Nezuko comes to Tanjiro's aid and appears from the box, and kicks one of the 3 clones in the face. Surprised at the sudden development, all 3 temporarily retreat underground. In the meantime, Nezuko looks at Kazumi and the girl he's carrying and sees Takeyo and Hanako, these 2 being her and Tanjiro's younger brother and sister. And this is when we get an interesting development about Nezuko's current condition. More specifically, what Urokodaki did to her while Tanjiro was away at the final selection. And this is where things get interesting. Now with knowledge of Nezuko's hypnotic suggestion, we kick off episode 7 with Nezuko protecting Kazumi and the girl who was abducted. And with that, Tanjiro decides to face the demons on their own turf and goes underground. As soon as Tanjiro is fully submerged, he sees all the clothes from the demon's victims. As you could probably guess, this angers Tanjiro. However, there's no time to let his emotions get the better of him. Time is definitely now on his side, being underwater and still having to worry about 2 demons while Nezuko is keeping the 3rd busy. Feeling that they have the upper hand, both demons charge at Tanjiro. However, thanks to Tanjiro's training in Mount Sagiri with Urokodaki, where the air is actually thinner there than the current swamp that he's in, this isn't much of a challenge for him. But there is one other thing. Thanks to his water breathing style, there are some techniques that he can't fully unleash unless he's underwater. And with that being the case, defeating both of the demons, he quickly swims back to the surface, but not before grabbing a piece of fabric to take with him. Back on land, Nezuko is still holding her own, so much so that the demon says this. In regard to the him that he's referring to, we'll see him soon enough. But the important thing here is that even without learning the fundamentals of being a demon, Nezuko is already overwhelmingly powerful without any special abilities. But because of her inexperience in combat, her movements are predictable and the demon uses that to keep up with her and even lands a hit. But before things can escalate any further, Tanjiro reemerges and slices off the demon's arms. He proceeds to ask about Muzan Kibutsuji, and when hearing the name, the demon begins to panic, almost like he's compelled to not say anything. While trembling, he says, Tanjiro smells his fear, and in that same moment, the demon, out of panic, regenerates his arms and lunges at him. However, Tanjiro quickly dodges and slices off his head and arms in a single strike. Once again though, Tanjiro isn't any closer to learning anything about Muzan. Afterwards, he notices that Nezuko has fallen asleep in order to stop the bleeding and heal herself. He then places her back in the box and checks on Kazumi. And this is where we learn a little more about what Satoko meant to him. Apparently, she was his fiancée. Angry with what Tanjiro is saying, Kazumi lashes out and asks what a kid like him knows about loss. However, Tanjiro being Tanjiro doesn't defend himself. He just lets Kazumi feel what he needs to feel and say what he needs to say. He then gives Kazumi the cloth that he retrieved while in the demon swamp, and it turns out he was able to recover Satoko's bow. Completing his mission, Tanjiro takes his leave, and while he walks away, Kazumi realizes that Tanjiro must have also experienced a substantial amount of loss. This causes him to apologize for what he said earlier by him not understanding what he's going through. Tanjiro realizes that he's not the only person whose life has been ruined by Muzan. He's hurt and killed many people, both directly and indirectly due to his actions. But yeah, this makes Tanjiro even more determined to find Muzan. So now what? Nope, no time to rest. On to the next mission. Skipping ahead, Tanjiro and Nezuko make it to Asakasa, Tokyo, and he's visibly shocked with how advanced they are compared to back home. Exhausted, they both stop to rest and Tanjiro orders a bowl of udon. However, when he sits down and starts eating, he picks up a strong scent. It turns out to be the same scent from his house, meaning only one thing. Muzan is close by. He catches up to a man with red eyes and a hat carrying what appears to be his daughter and walking with his wife. Understandably so, Tanjiro is shocked to see that he's living as if he's a normal person.
私に何か用ですか？随分慌てていらっしゃるようですが。
Tanjiro is at a complete loss for words and not sure how to react, seeing two humans so oblivious to the fact that this man that they're standing with is the strongest demon in existence. His wife then asks if he knows Tanjiro, where he says that he's never seen him before and that he must have a mistake for someone else. And in that same instant, he scratches the back of a man's neck who ends up turning into a demon before our very eyes. The victim then attacks the woman that he's with and Tanjiro is forced to save her. Jumping straight into episode 8, with all the commotion, this gives Muzan the time he needs to get away from Tanjiro as he subdues the demon. Unfortunately, it's not going to be as easy as cutting off the demon's head since there's a crowd of people around. This actually surprised me. I didn't expect them to run into Muzan so soon. Normally there's a big lead up to seeing your big bad, but with Demon Slayer they're just like, hey, here I am, well, see ya. Obviously things didn't go that smoothly, but still. It's a bold move letting your main antagonist come face to face with your protagonist so early on. So as Muzan is getting away, Tanjiro declares that he'll find him wherever he goes and that he'll never forgive him for what he's done. Some officers then arrive to break up the commotion to what they believe is just a fight, and they also believe Tanjiro is out of his mind. Before things can escalate, someone who looked as if they were a normal woman turns out to be a demon, and she uses her blood demon art to distract the officers and approaches Tanjiro. She's surprised that he still thinks of a newly made demon as a person and is even trying to help him in the first place. She then discloses that she's indeed a demon, but she's also a doctor who is wanting to bring down Muzan. And speaking of Muzan, he sends his family away with a reassuring smile on his face, stating that he'll be home soon. And with that, his wife and daughter are driven off. Muzan then walks into an alley where he runs into a couple drunk people. He tries to calmly walk away after apologizing for running into one of them, however they begin to mock his appearance. And now no longer having any more patience, he deals with all three of them rather, violently.
耳に花札のような飾りをつけた鬼狩りの首を持ってこい。いいな。
きょい。
仰せのままに。
And with that, the two demons head out on their hunt for Tanjiro. Meanwhile, we get a quick glimpse into the past where we see a man who faintly resembles Tanjiro with the same earrings but with longer hair, hinting to us that this is quite more personal than just a simple show of disrespect. Tanjiro has made it back to the udon stand where he had left Nezuko in pursuit for Muzan, and he's now being chewed out by the owner. He says that he's more angry that Tanjiro didn't eat his udon over him not paying for it. To help make it up to him, Tanjiro orders 2 more bowls of udon and scarfs them both down. Once he's done eating, he thanks the cook and is on his way. Before he can make it too far, the boy accompanying the demon doctor pays Tanjiro and Nezuko a visit, saying that she wants to see him. He then asks if the eyesore next to him is a demon, where Tanjiro is visibly confused at who he's referring to as an eyesore. And after setting the record straight that Nezuko is nothing close to an eyesore, the boy leads them to where the demon doctor lives, which ends up being cloaked to keep unwanted guests from finding her. Finally making it to the house, the doctor updates them on the woman's condition and says that she'll be fine. However, her husband is still restrained in the basement.
人の怪我の手当てをして辛くないですか?
We're then formally introduced to the two demons, the woman being Tamayo and the boy being Yushiro. She proceeds to answer his question and says that it's not unbearable and that it's much easier for her because she's tweaked her body considerably. Not just her body, but Yushiro's as well. Now they could live without devouring humans. All they need is just a small amount of human blood to survive. And as for how she gets them,
不快に思われるかもしれませんが、金銭に余裕のない方から輸血と称して血を買っています。もちろん彼らの体に支障が出ない量です。
these changes that Tamayo has put herself and Yushiro through is why Tanjiro couldn't pick up the normal scent that he'd get from demons. We then get an interesting development. Not only was she able to remove Muzan's curse, the one that keeps people from talking about him, but she is also the one that turned Yushiro into a demon. We'll get why she turned him into a demon later on, but the reason why this is interesting is because normally no one but Muzan can reproduce demons. However, she's the exception. It took her over 200 years to figure out how to transform a demon.
私は鬼を増やそうとはしていません。不治の病や怪我などを負って余命いくばくもない人にしかその処置はしません。
For both of those scenarios, she's always asked the person first if they want to live, even if that means they become a demon. Just by Tamayo's scent, Tanjiro can tell that she's being truthful and is someone that he can trust. He then asks if there is a way to return a demon back to human form, where we then cut to the two demons Muzan sent after Tanjiro. The man with the eyes with arrows in his hands is able to follow their tracks, and they successfully find the cloaked house. He's even able to tell how many are present. Cutting back to Tamayo, we learn that she also believes that it's possible to turn a demon back to a human, and that she's actually researching it. Since they have the same goal, she requests that Tanjiro let her study Nezuko's blood, and that he bring blood from demons closely related to Muzan that she can study as well. And by closely related, she means demons whose powers are on par with Muzan. As for why she wants Nezuko's blood, she goes on to say how extremely rare and unique her current condition is. She believes the cause of this was due to her 2-year slumber, and she's interested in figuring out the change that happened in her body during that time.
通常それほど長い間人の血肉や獣の肉を口にできなければまず間違いなく凶暴化します。しかし驚くべきことに禰豆子さんにはその症状がない。
After hearing everything she has to say, Tanjiro accepts her request. And as soon as they get done talking, the two demons Muzan sent to kill Tanjiro finally arrive. Which now brings us to episode 9. Having successfully found where Tanjiro is, the Temari demon and the Arrow demon waste no time going on the offensive. As for their actual names, it's Susamaru and Yahaba. Susamaru's weapons are Temari, but no ordinary Temari. These Temari pack a little bit of a punch. Yeah, but don't worry, he's still alive. When I first watched this, I totally forgot about that, and I was just like, damn, that's it for our boy, huh? But anyway, once Tanjiro realizes that he's the one that they're after, he tells Tamayo to find somewhere to hide until the fight is over. However, she tells him not to worry about her and that they'll be fine without his protection since they're both demons. And with that, the fight continues. Susamaru throws her Temari again, but noting how it swerves to hit Yushiro, Tanjiro decides not to dodge it. Instead, he plans to face it head on. He uses one of his breathing techniques called Drop Ripple Thrust Curve to cast a Temari. However, it's not that easy. Even though all the momentum appears to be lost, it begins to move on its own. This means something bigger is at play here rather than her just naturally throwing them. Yushiro's head then regenerates and he vents his frustration about how easily his cloaking was discovered, and how he can't mask people's very existence. Susamaru then claims to be one of the 12 demon moons, meaning she serves directly under Muzan. She then proceeds to say how it should be an honor to be killed by her because of this. Growing 4 more arms, she can now throw a total of 6 Temari. Another flurry of attacks come their way and Yushiro tells Tanjiro to pay attention to the arrows that navigate the Temari. However, Tanjiro can't see them. He then decides to lend Tanjiro his sight, and now he's able to see the arrows clear as day. Being able to do so now allows him to go on the offensive. Tanjiro sends Nezuko to keep Yahaba occupied, so he can focus on Susamaru. And Nezuko is successful with finding him and attacks him immediately, causing the arrows to disappear from the Temari. Not wasting any time, Tanjiro cuts all of the Temari in half, and then uses his third form called Flowing Dance and cuts off all of Susamaru's arms. Since Tamayo needs blood samples from demons close to Muzan, he makes it his goal to extract some of Susamaru's blood. She scoffs at Tanjiro's plan and immediately regenerates her arms and materializes more Temari. And back with Yahaba and Nezuko, he uses his ability to knock her back and rejoin Susamaru. Yushiro tells Tanjiro to focus on Yahaba while they take on Susamaru, where Tanjiro agrees and leaves her to them. Up until this point, Tanjiro's threat only shows when he finds an opening and can land a finishing blow on a demon. However, this time it snaps, and Yahaba uses his ability to throw Tanjiro around like crazy. To keep himself from falling and hitting the ground at full force, Tanjiro releases attacks to help soften the blow. But as you can imagine, this takes a lot of energy. Over with Nezuko and Yushiro versus Susamaru, they're making small progress and we see how he can use his ability to make himself invincible. He proclaims that he'll never forgive her for hurting Tamayo, and hearing this name piques Yahaba's interest. But why? Yep, she is also wanted by Muzan. Now their goal is to not only kill Tanjiro, but to also take Tamayo. Susamaru continues her assault and throws her Temari once more. This time Nezuko tries to kick one, but in doing so it rips off her leg, leaving her out of commission for the time being. Tending to Nezuko's wounds, Tamayo knows that her leg isn't healing instantly like a normal demon would. In her case, it's recovering slowly. She then decides to use some medicine on her to heal her leg. Back to Yahaba and Tanjiro, he's still unsure how to get close enough to him to cut off his head. Not only is there the obvious issue of being hit by Yahaba's attacks, but what makes things even more complicated is the fact that the arrows won't disappear until it connects with its target. And to make things worse, he can't cut or interrupt the arrows either. Right now he's completely stuck on the defensive as he tries to figure out how to change the arrow's direction without touching them. But that's when Tanjiro gets the idea, and that is to adapt his moves and blend his techniques to manipulate the arrows and move them how he wants. And with that, Tanjiro successfully uses Yahaba's own ability against him to slice off his head. Diving into episode 10, we see that even though his head's been cut off, he still has more than enough energy to do another attack. And not able to get away from it, Tanjiro has no choice but to endure and use his breathing forms the best he can to soften the impact. The issue is that he's already exhausted, so every attack he does just places more and more strain on his body. All he can do is wait for the arrows to disappear, which he's able to do once Yahaba dies. With no energy left, Tanjiro free falls and is barely able to move. As for his injuries, they consist of a broken rib and leg. All things considered, I'm surprised that's all that was broken. But still with one demon left to defeat, Tanjiro tries to muster up the energy to make it back to Nezuko, Tamayo, and Yushiro. Back with Susamoru, she uses her Temari to kick up some dust to use as a smokescreen. However, dodging them is still easy for Yushiro since the attacks are linear. But reading attacks aren't just easy for him, but also for her. Even though he conceals himself thanks to all the dust in the air, she's still able to know his whereabouts. So well in fact that she accurately throws her Temari at his head. But thanks to Nezuko though, it doesn't make contact. Yep, she's finally healed him back in the fight. And this time she was able to make contact with the Temari and keep her leg. Unlike last time when she tried to kick it and lost it. Tamayo then explains that the medicine that she gave Nezuko had no strength enhancing capabilities, and that the power we see here is Nezuko's strength alone. But realizing how things still are now, Tamayo says that Susamoru would still be able to defeat Nezuko if she were to go all out. This being the case, she decides to use her blood demon art called Magical Aroma of Daylight to make her mind vulnerable by weakening her brain functions. This also means she won't be able to lie. To provoke Susamoru, Tamayo begins to talk about Muzan and how he's a coward who constantly lives in fear. And growing more and more frustrated with what Tamayo is saying, Susamoru accidentally says, "Remember Muzan's curse? Well, we're about to witness it." We would have seen it in action earlier if the demon Tanjiro had defeated back in the town where he was abducting all those girls actually said his name. But unlike the swamp demon, Susamoru actually says it out loud. Which means... Getting a closer look at Susamoru, Tamayo confirms that she wasn't one of the 12 Kizuki. As for how she knows, it's because there's no number carved into her eye like all 12 Kizuki members have. She also simply states that in comparison to the actual 12 Kizuki members, both Susamoru and Yahaba were too weak, which of course surprises Tanjiro. Either way, Tamayo decides to take some of Susamoru's blood for study. And once she and Yushiro are both gone, Susamoru begins to ask for her Temari as if she were a child. Tanjiro brings it to her and she asks him to play with her. And this is where we realize that she really was just a kid compelled to fight by Muzan. Since it's now daybreak and Susamoru is gone, Tanjiro joins Tamayo and Yushiro in the basement where Nezuko also is. We see how affectionate she is when it comes to Tamayo and Yushiro, and Tanjiro explains that she must see them as someone in their family. Even with the hypnotic suggestion that she's under from Urokodaki, she still perceives the two of them as humans even though biologically they're not. Hearing this makes Tamayo actually tear up with joy. And in that same moment, Yushiro thinks back on when he was still human and terminally ill, and was given the choice on whether to die from his illness or become a demon. Of course he chose to live. We then come back to the original scene and Tamayo states that they're relocating and asks if Tanjiro would like her to take care of Nezuko. The reason why she offered is because she knows how dangerous this journey will be, especially with him having to get blood samples from the 12 Kizuki in order to complete her research and finding a cure for Nezuko. However, Tanjiro declines, stating that they won't live apart from each other. As he and Nezuko take their leave, Yushiro calls out to him and says, This is him taking back what he said back in episode 8 when he called Nezuko an eyesore. And for the final scene, Tanjiro's crow comes back telling him to go southeast. On his way to the next destination, he runs into Yellowhair, the guy we briefly saw at the final selection. Yep, things are about to get pretty interesting. And very, very, very obnoxious. Yellowhair.
そうか、わかった。なんとかするから。
Episode 11 starts off with yellow hair begging a girl to marry him. And when I say begging, I mean begging. Seeing that the girl he's harassing isn't the least bit interested, Tanjiro separates him from the girl and straight up tells him that she's not interested. He then tells the girl not to worry. As for how we got into this mess in the first place, the girl saw him collapse on the side of the road looking ill, so she decided to speak to him. Yellow hair thought this was a sign of love when that wasn't the case. She was just trying to be nice. Yellow hair then discusses his next mission that he claims will kill him because he's too weak, and that he wants Tanjiro to protect him until he gets married. They both then formally introduce themselves, and we learn that Yellow hair's name is actually Zenitsu. Nice to meet you, Zenitsu. The man of many octaves. I still can't believe how much this guy yells. Literally almost every time he's on screen, I'm just like, but back to the scene, Tanjiro asks why someone as shameless as Zenitsu would be a demon slayer in the first place. He reveals that he never wanted to be, but ended up getting into debt with a woman who ended up handing him over to his trainer. And that's the person who made him become a demon slayer. Now that Zenitsu is finally calm, they both share lunch and walk in silence. Tanjiro tells him that he shouldn't be making trouble for his sparrow. And this is where we learn that Tanjiro can actually understand what Zenitsu's bird is saying, even though all it does is chirp.
善逸がずっとそんな風で仕事に行きたがらないし、女の子にすぐちょっかい出す上にいびきもうるさくて困ってるって言ってるぞ。
Tanjiro's crow then directs him to their next destination, which ends up being a mansion. Getting a little bit closer, he's able to smell blood coming from inside. Zenitsu says he doesn't smell anything, but he does hear people nearby, which ends up being two crying kids. Tanjiro asks what they're doing here, and the boy says that their older brother got taken to that house by a monster. They track the demon down by following their brother's blood trail to this point. Tanjiro then assures the two kids that he'll go rescue their brother and defeat whatever's inside. Zenitsu says that he hears another sound that doesn't stop and says that it sounds like a Tsuzumi. Again, Tanjiro doesn't hear anything. It appears Tanjiro isn't the only one who has heightened senses. Unlike Tanjiro, who has a heightened sense of smell, Zenitsu has heightened hearing. As the Tsuzumi sound gets louder and faster, a bloodied man gets thrown out of the second floor of the mansion. However, the man doesn't end up being the kids' brother. The boy knows that their brother was wearing a persimmon-colored kimono. This means that the demon captured more than one person. Tanjiro leaves the box with Nezuko in it behind in case of an emergency so the kids will be protected. Because if you remember, Nezuko's hypnotic suggestion is to protect humans from demons who try to harm them, and she should be fine there since they're in the shade. We then follow Tanjiro and Zenitsu inside, where Tanjiro tells him that since he has a broken rib and leg, he might need help fighting. And as you'd expect, Zenitsu freaks out. After hearing some scratching sounds from inside the box that has Nezuko in it, the two kids got scared and ran inside to find Tanjiro. The mansion then shakes and the four of them are split into pairs due to Zenitsu accidentally bumping the girl into Tanjiro, causing them both to stumble into a nearby room. With every beat of the Tsuzumi, the room around them changes. Tanjiro calms the girl down, who then tells him her name, which is Teruko. He then senses the demon, who soon after stops in front of their room. Cutting to how Zenitsu and the boy are doing, the boy actually gets on to Zenitsu for being a coward and clinging on to a younger person when he's the one with the sword around his hip. Desperate to find a way out, Zenitsu opens all the nearby doors, but they all just lead to another empty room. Until he comes upon a room that's not so empty. Yep, a person with a board head and two swords is in one of those rooms. Back to Tanjiro, he tells Teruko to hide behind one of the shelves while he takes care of the demon. The demon appears to be angry that one of his prey was able to run away thanks to other demons barging into his home. Tanjiro then calls out to the demon, formally introducing himself, then attacks. Once he's close enough to land a hit, the demon hits his Tsuzumi and the room turns. This is the demon's blood demon art. It gives him full control of the mansion. Tanjiro then smells another odd scent, but it's not a demon this time. It actually ends up being the boar-headed guy that Zenitsu ran into earlier. It appears that he's found his way to Tanjiro and also the demon that he's been after. Going straight into episode 12, Tanjiro tells Boarhead to not recklessly launch his attacks. The reason for this is that the room is spinning and there's no guarantee that he won't harm Teruko or Tanjiro in the process. The room then spins again, and once Boarhead recovers, he actually ends up stepping on Teruko. Tanjiro then rushes over and tosses him off, telling him not to stomp on her. And confused who Tanjiro is meant to be, Boarhead then attacks him head on rather than going for the demon they're meant to be focusing on. But before he can get close, the demon goes on the offensive. Turns out he's able to do more than just rotate and change rooms. He also has a claw attack. Tanjiro and Terako are then separated from Boarhead, and now the search for the demon commences once again. While they're roaming the halls, he picks up a strange scent and tracks it down to one room in particular. It ends up being a boy with one of the demon's Tsuzumi, and in a panic he prepares to hit it. Meanwhile, Zenitsu and Shoichi, that's the boy's name, run into a demon that walks on all fours. They make it into a room that ends up being a dead end. In a panic, Zenitsu passes out, seeing that the demon has finally cornered them. Shoichi then backs up and drags Zenitsu with him. Amused, the demon launches his tongue at them, and in a split second, Zenitsu slices it off. He then gets into his thunder breathing stance. Once the demon is dead, Zenitsu wakes back up and panics when he sees its head. He actually thinks Shoichi is the one who saved him, and with nothing else after them, they continue trying to find an escape. Next up we have Boarhead, who runs into a demon who doesn't put up much of a fight and is easily brought down by him. Going back to the main demon with the Tsuzumi, we see he's still looking for the humans he refers to as Marechi so he can eat them. Marechi means rare blood. He then reveals his eye, and we learn that his motive is to eat as many Marechi as possible so he can reclaim his place among the 12 Kizuki. As for the number he was Lower Moon 6. A flashback then plays where we learn the demon's name is Kyogai. He's in the middle of eating a human before Muzan asks if he can't eat anymore. Kyogai then gets his eye slashed since he can't eat more humans, which also means he's unable to get stronger. And if you can't get stronger, then that means you're no longer useful to Muzan. Back in the present, Terako is reunited with her older brother Kyoshi. Tanjiro commends him for holding out this long and gives him some healing ointment that Urokodaki gave him. He then gets Kyoshi to tell him what happened. Apparently the three demons were fighting over who would eat Kyoshi since they couldn't come to an agreement. One of the demons ended up ripping out one of Kyogai's Tsuzumi, and that is when Kyoshi took it and struck it, which ended up sending him into another room. He also tells Tanjiro that they kept calling him Marechi, which again means the owner of rare blood. This means they have the most rare blood type and they are considered a feast for demons. Sensing the demon getting closer, Tanjiro tells Terako to stay with Kyoshi, and as soon as he leaves the room to strike the Tsuzumi to move to another room. He tells them once this is all over, he'll follow their scent and call their names once he opens the door, so they know it's him. And now for the main attraction. Wasting no time, Kyogai begins to rotate the room trying to get Tanjiro to lose his balance. But Tanjiro is getting used to his movements, but with his current injuries it proves to be difficult trying to keep up. Reminding himself of all the people depending on him, Tanjiro stops doubting himself and vows to not give up. And for the final episode, we're covering in part 1 of Revisiting Demon Slayer Season 1, Episode 13. As the fight proceeds, the mansion continues to change until it finally throws out Zenitsu and Shoichi. Still not able to get close to Kyogai, Tanjiro tries to get his footing under control, but when a room is constantly spinning, that's easier said than done. Tanjiro then tells him that he won't hand over Kyoshi and that he also won't give up trying to defeat him, and this angers Kyogai so he speeds up his attacks, so much so that the paper stowed away in his cabinet spread all over the floor. This then initiates a flashback of Kyogai when he was a human. It turns out he was a writer, and in this flashback Kyogai recalls being belittled and insulted by a man. He's told that his writing is boring trash that has no beauty, fragility, or impact. The man then states he should just quit and stick with his hobby, which is painting the Tsuzumi. He proceeds to step on his writing as he leaves the room, and this is where we see him transform into a demon and kill the man. Back to the present, he gets angrier and begins rapid drumming, now spinning the room so fast that Tanjiro's feet can't even touch a surface. But once the rapid strikes finally slow down, Tanjiro is able to land, and he's careful to not step on any of the papers on the floor. This temporarily surprises Kyogai, but he continues his assault and tries to land one of his claw strikes on Tanjiro. However, he's now able to tell the direction of the claw attacks because of the scent of mold that he gives off before it happens. And now being found out, this puts Kyogai at a disadvantage. Tanjiro then finally goes on the offensive as his opening thread appears.
Kyogai! Kimi no kekkijutsu wa sugokatta!
Though Kyogai loses, being acknowledged calms him down and makes him feel valued. He even asks if Tanjiro really thought that his blood demon art was incredible, where Tanjiro says again that it was. However, he says he can't forgive him for killing others. Before Kyogai is able to fully disappear, Tanjiro extracts some of his blood with the tool that Tamayo gave him. It actually draws the blood automatically once inserted. A cat then shows up to pick up the blood sample that vanishes, and as Kyogai disappears, Tanjiro tells him to rest in peace and takes his leave.
Kiyoshi! Teriko! Kiyoshi! Teriko!
Tanjiro finds Teriko and Kiyoshi, who panics and begins throwing things at him. They thought something had gone wrong since the Tsuzumi that they were holding on to had disappeared. Reassuring them that they're safe, Teriko begins to cry tears of relief. Tanjiro then takes them outside where he immediately smells blood and sees Boar Head hurting Zenitsu. Zenitsu tells him that he was able to keep the box safe while he was away. We then go to earlier when Zenitsu and Shoichi first made it outside, and we see that Boar Head makes it out soon after. He then says there's something inside the box and prepares to kill it. However, Zenitsu is able to jump in the way before he can stab into it. Boar Head tells him to move because there's a demon inside. However, Zenitsu says that he already knew that from the very start when first meeting Tanjiro because the sounds demons make aren't like human sounds.
生き物からはとにかく音がしている。呼吸音、心音、血の巡る音。それを注意深く聞くと、相手が何を考えているか分かった。
In the end, he never asked Tanjiro about the box because he was sure he had his reasons. He then goes on to say that he'll talk to Tanjiro directly about it, and having no interest in learning what those reasons are, Boar Head then begins to hit Zenitsu, and that's when Tanjiro finally arrives. Zenitsu then says that he decided to protect the box because Tanjiro said that it was important to him, more than his own life. Boar Head then holds his sword above Zenitsu with the intention of killing him, and before he can land a fatal blow, Tanjiro dashes toward him. And that's going to wrap up part 1 of Revisiting Demon Slayer Season 1. The second and final part, of course, is going to cover episodes 14 through 26, and then on to the Mugen Train arc once those 7 episodes come out. But until then, I will see you guys later, and have a good one. Subscribe.